Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final session of day one of ETS21. Thanks for sticking with us so far. We hope you've enjoyed all the wonderful presentations we've had up to this point. We hope you enjoy this final one of the day. Today we're going to be talking about storage, and to kick that off, before we kick that off, rather, I'll have our panelists introduce themselves. Sarah, why don't you go ahead?
Good afternoon, everyone. I know we're closing it out for the day, so we're going to bring up the energy level. Hopefully you've had a great number of sessions with Zpryme today. I'm glad to be here. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at the New York Power Authority. I oversee the contracting and bidding of our generation assets and all of our customer-facing business lines that ranges from our energy vehicle charging infrastructure to energy efficiency retrofits to all of the behind-the-meter distributed energy resources, which includes renewables and storage technology. So very pleased to talk about that topic here today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, Sarah. We also have Teresa.
Hey, everybody. I'm Teresa Ringenbach. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Armada Power. We are a behind-the-meter thermal storage device that uses electric resistance water heaters as grid assets. I'm very excited to get into the storage topic here.
We're excited to have you. And then finally, we have John.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Matthiesen. I'm the Senior Director of our Smart Grid and Utility Asset Management team at Hatch, which is we're a global engineering firm, over 9,000 team members, with about two-thirds of those across 50 offices in Canada and the US. Our team, we work with utility, industrial, commercial clients, really helping them do more with less while modernizing and automating their grids. And one of the areas that we really focus in on is how to leverage DERs such as energy storage to improve power reliability and resiliency. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I'm sort of interested in how all of your companies are pushing storage forward, and I think we'll start. We'll go in reverse order. I'll start with you, John.
Sure, thanks, Dylan. So as an engineering firm, really, we have been helping a number of our clients, both in the industrial side and with utilities, advance a number of energy storage projects across North America. It tends to be where the projects are at the moment, and Australia. Specifically at present, we're helping advance what are two of the largest chemical or traditional lithium-ion batteries in Canada. One is a 20 megawatt, 40 megawatt hour project that's being used for an N-1 resiliency or redundancy use case, which is a little bit interesting. And then the other battery we're working on is, or project is actually transmission connected, which has its own challenges. Beyond that, Hatch being a private engineering firm, we also invest in other companies. And so we have looked at and recently invested in a company that uses machine learning to really optimize battery system utilization in buildings primarily. And then I think most interesting, another area that we're seeing a lot of growth in is looking at hydrogen as a storage mechanism. And we're doing a couple of projects around how hydrogen can generate hydrogen with excess hydropower, as well as some more connecting hydrogen generation with nuclear generation, including small modular reactors. So there's a fair bit of interesting, I would say, innovative things happening in this space. We're happy to be a part of.
Thank you. And Teresa, what's Armada doing to push storage forward?
So I think Armada, at a global level, we're actually trying to change the view of what is storage. I think traditionally people think of it just as lithium-ion batteries or hydrogen types of batteries. We're taking it to a different level, which is we're taking it to the residential consumer. So we actually use a water heater as that behind-the-meter thermal storage. But our process in what we talk to our utility and co-op customers about goes beyond just what you normally think of for residential. So residential, everybody immediately goes to energy efficiency in kilowatt hours. We try to pull it, I always call it get baby out of the corner, right? That's my Dirty Dancing reference. We aren't just energy efficiency, right? We need to think about residential customers in terms of demand. So how do we do that? One, we do it with multifamily communities. So low income communities and traditional multifamily have sort of been left out of the mix. You throw Armada in there on 300 different water heaters and you just got 300 kW of DR response. So it's a whole different way to look at it. The other piece of it is when we talk about storage, everybody just talks about demand, and that's great, but we have to talk about other benefits to the grid, right? There's cold load pickup, there's droop control, there's, and when you put it in certain places, right, you can actually offset investments in your grid by not having to invest in certain circuit enhancements. So there's a whole slew of value that tends to get ignored. And that leads to the third piece, which is when we show up, we can help absorb some of those quick discharges that traditionally degrade the life of the bigger batteries. And you need both, right? So a lot of these regulators out there look at batteries and they're like, oh, they don't last very long and they're really super expensive. And what are we really getting out of it? Oh, okay, maybe a few kW of demand response and let's all move on. Or maybe we're doing maintenance on a line so we keep the power on. Yay, but is that really worth the money? So we sort of step up and say, we're going to extend the life. We're going to take you out of that residential world and put some benefits into your residential customers in addition to these traditional grid asset benefits that you see. So that's a long-winded way of saying, what do? We take it out of that world where everybody just thinks about things in terms of energy efficiency or commercial demand response. And we say, look, you need to look at the entire grid and you need to value this as a whole and not within a little box for one particular program.
Teresa, were you peeking at the chat? Because someone asked you basically that exact question.
I don't even have the chat up.
Well done. Yeah, because someone asked what value there was beyond energy savings transaction that can be applied to DR applications for utilities and customers. So well done.
That's because these are my people, right? We're all the energy nerds.
So Sarah, why don't you talk about what NYPA is doing?
Sure. So the New York Power Authority is the largest state-owned utility in the country. We have about 5 gigawatts of market power. 75% of that is hydroelectric power. So I like to say that NYPA is the original renewable company of New York State. And then secondly, we have between our pumped hydro storage, Blenheim Gilboa plant, and our Lewiston pumping station up at the Niagara facility, we have about 1.4 gigawatts of hydro storage. So going to what Teresa was saying, storage is not just lithium ion batteries. We consider ourselves also the first energy storage company in New York State too. So with that as a backdrop, recognizing the value of storage, NYPA has been focused in recent times on three levels for storage: at the grid scale, at the distribution scale, and ultimately behind the meter. At the grid scale, we have a 20 megawatt 1 hour battery that is supporting and is in construction, soon to be commissioned, to support frequency regulation as well as absorb some of the negative pricing. So standard energy arbitrage, which you typically are not seeing as a value proposition many times for storage yet, but as the price points come down, there is opportunity there to charge when prices are negative with wind in the north and discharge at higher price levels. Secondly, we are looking at non-wires alternatives. So we leased out our land at the Paletti site, which is a very congested area in the Con Edison, New York City control area territory. And there we have a 100 megawatt battery that's going in by a global 174, and that is in response to the Con Ed RFP to support, again, the introduction of storage in more congested urban areas. And thirdly, behind the meter, we have over 325 megawatts of solar plus storage in our pipeline. Every solar project that we do or with our customers, we look to pair it with storage. And so we have some marquee projects like the largest solar plus storage, the largest solar rooftop project at the Javits Center, actually in conjunction with Siemens. We have the largest community distribution generation facility in New York City with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, where we're pairing 10, 11 megawatts of solar with 8 of storage. So there's a lot to be done, and NYPA is active in all of it. And fundamentally, we're looking at being a market accelerator and to lead by example.
That's pretty awesome. So if NYPA is sort of looking to pair storage with all sorts of projects. I'm interested in John or Teresa. Either of you can hop in on this, but what sorts of projects for a utility that's maybe not leading as far ahead as NYPA is. What sorts of projects do you think that utilities should be focusing on to pair with storage? Where are some good entry points?
That's a great question, Dylan. I think one of the things that was mentioned actually sort of by Teresa and Sarah is non-wire alternatives, delaying significant capital spend. We're working with a utility now that has a lot of radial feeders, and they're having voltage challenges at the ends, or what we would call the fringe of the grid, at the ends of some of those radial lines. And instead of upgrading the entire line, you can install a battery appropriately sized and the right chemistry of the right battery at the end of that line in order to help that client. There's also some industrial clients that actually provide power quality issues to the utility. And whether it's the industrial client themselves who want to install the battery behind the meter, or the utility client that wants to balance their network, either way, there are batteries that can help with power quality issues as well that would otherwise require more expensive and more timely upgrades.
And just to add on to that, I mean, clearly the integration of renewables is an area that the system and the industry is focused on. I'm most bullish and excited about all of the offshore wind that's coming in off of the coast of New York State, 9 gigawatts that we're targeting by 2035. And with that, I see a lot of opportunity, even as we further increase and make resilient and increase the robustness of our transmission network, really identifying locations that can absorb some of that wind power off of the coast. A second area, and so that to me is T&D deferral. A second area that I'm excited about, and we've seen this in California with Southern California Edison, which did an actual like-for-like gas peaker plant replacement as we look to transition off of fossil fuels capacity and peaking capacity replacement when it comes to fossil units is also of interest. So in our generation portfolio, we have some gas peakers and gas plants, and there we're excited to look at the opportunity to pair storage with that in a hybrid capacity, as well as actually to look at doing some hydrogen pilots to further decarbonize the fuel that is going into the system. There is an area that I think when it comes to the technology, and of course we need long duration storage, so identifying and continuing to support the development of long duration storage technologies so that we have the level of reliability and resilience that we need in the system.
And so I think everybody captured most of what we would talk about. Sarah just talked about renewables firming, which is actually how Armada was originally invented. Was a design to actually sponge up that extra solar and take those quick discharges off of the grid. But I would take it a step further for Armada and what we do. When you talk about programs that we look to pair with, beneficial electrification programs are a big one for us. That fuel switching, I don't care how efficient you're being with all those appliances, you're adding to the grid. And if you're adding to a grid while you're simultaneously adding more renewables, you need a way to balance that beyond just the battery. So again, that's a place where we sort of show up and we say, you're going to shift 17% of the load in your home to match up with where you need it to go, utility, whether that's you want to run a program that says, hey, we installed solar and we want to run all of your water heaters straight off of our solar, or if you want to use it to actually do some of the stuff that John and Sarah were talking about, which is to avoid T&D as you electrify more and more things in somebody's home. And then the other piece of it is we take it down to that actual residential level. I'm probably going to be hammering away at this, but I've had 20 years of working the regulatory system and seeing really great ideas killed by the M&B. At the end of the day, we need our regulators and our policyholders to stop putting all these things into one box and let us show the full value. Because the problem is the utility might come in and say, I'm going to do a time of use program along with some beneficial electrification. And then you lose all of the grid benefit, right? What about that T&D deferral and the non-wires alternative value and all those other things that you're getting? So from our perspective, when you get to that residential level, you have to show all those other things or it immediately gets chucked out.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, I mean, it's interesting because we're expanding how the industry thinks about storage in a couple ways, because like it's not just lithium ion. There's all these other cool technologies out there that you guys were talking about. I mean, especially up here in Washington State, we have a lot of hydro storage in reservoirs. You know, when there's not horrible droughts, but it sounds like we're moving beyond demand response as well. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't say moving beyond demand response. It's still very, very important, but it's not the only thing that we're focused on anymore. So yeah, how are we demonstrating value beyond just, oh, it's cheaper to buy batteries now? And I know you just talked about it a bit, Teresa, but I'm curious what John and Sarah have seen as well.
I'd love for us to get to the state where we can be using terms like baseload solar or baseload wind power, where, you know, renewables firming sounds great and it's fancy, but really, truly, can we use that offshore wind that's coming into New York State with the right amount of batteries and generate and supply truly baseload wind energy? And you know, if you got the right amount of batteries and the price point, the way that it's coming down, probably not too far off of being able to do that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, when you look at, I'm back in 2010, and this is from BNEF, right? Just some of my own numbers, but it was like $1,800 per kilowatt hour, right? And now we're in this day and age, you know, 150 kilowatt hour. So you have seen a huge amount of technology price decline. It still needs to come down, but when you have decreased tenfold, you know, in a decade, that's very encouraging. When I think what Teresa touched on was a little bit on the regulatory, and maybe we'll get to a question about that before, but in the end, again, it's looking at the multifaceted nature of storage technology. I tend to think of a battery as like a jackknife or a Swiss Army knife, where you can kind of pull out all the different elements, right? And so again, technology usually advances well in advance of the regulatory framework, and that's really where we are now. We're trying to move the market and the regulators to a new paradigm. And so to me, some of the areas that I think are interesting there are around dual participation in the RTO markets, as well as the distribution level. And then, as Teresa articulated, recognizing the different value streams that can be stacked up to support storage coming in, such that there will be a future time when it will not need out-of-market incentives and subsidies. I think New York State, fortunately, as a single state RTO, has been quite leading on that relative to the FERC Order 222, and also to the PSC, and looking at the VEDR, or the value of distributed energy resources stack as well. But again, the harmonization of all that takes some time, but we've got a lot of great minds that are focused on it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I would just add to that. Sarah mentioned New York, but California, the staff in California actually took it a step further, and they said, why are we forcing everybody to just enroll in, like, everybody's in at the utility program. You're just in. If you do something, you're in. So they actually took a step back and said, are we creating barriers just by forcing people to enroll? So I would give props to California on that one too.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that power providers can design programs to best enable and take advantage of available storage solutions?
I mean, I think the best option is what's been mentioned. It's really value stacking, you know, leveraging the multiple benefits of batteries. And yeah, I don't know if you can build on that anymore, emphasizing to regulators everywhere, you know, let's make this possible.
There's some positive movement too at the federal level, right? With the investment tax credit, both wind and solar have benefited from that over the last several years. I believe it's in the bill. I'm not a lobbyist, and I don't know where in the state of affairs it is relative to kind of complete bipartisan support and getting through in some of these other stimulus packages. But I think that also will provide some tailwinds to to the storage industry as well.
Yeah, I would throw one other piece out there. When we think about storage, I think we all sort of gravitate towards, well, we don't, right? But in general, there's a policy shift that said we want big grid storage batteries. But from, Tesla Powerwalls to the concept of using EVs for batteries, we have to stop thinking about all these residential customers as these sort of isolated little houses, and really how they connect into the grid. And I think even within our own industry, we still isolate ourselves. There's EV discussions, right? There's solar plus battery interconnection discussions. Like, we're separating ourselves, and there should be a broader, if it does these things, it brings these benefits, which I think would help speed up some of those behind the meter sort of storage investments by individual residential customers too.
Go ahead, John.
So, sorry, Sarah. I completely agree, Teresa. And even building on that a little further, you could look at a building as a grid resource where you have a battery that could be a thermal, could be lithium ion. In that building, you could have EVs that are parked in the parking lot that you can leverage the energy within those batteries. You can have demand response. You have perhaps getting into building integrated photovoltaics on the side, and in the aggregate, that building becomes a resource that utilities can then leverage if the right mechanisms are in place in the marketplace.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. If we're meant to have conflict here, you're not getting it from us, sorry. But but no, exactly. I mean, NYPA is building out the public electric vehicle charging infrastructure across New York State and helping our transit agencies electrify their bus systems across the state. So there, again, as Teresa and John said, are a bunch of batteries on wheels, right, that are mobile when we start thinking about it. We also have our New York Energy Manager, which is our digital energy management system, which is helping optimize and orchestrate the energy within a building at the sub-metering level. And so again, as Teresa said, packaging and thinking of all of these assets as tools in a toolkit, and as part of ultimately, a distributed grid, which we all talk about. It's not really earth-shattering. One of the things though that NYPA is working on and I'm excited about is building virtual power plants, which ultimately will be exactly this, and aggregating all of these assets together. The only other thing I would say in terms of thinking about storage is there's a very large focus now on environmental justice and supporting the environment and improving the environment for all residents across New York State and really across the world, right? When we talk about climate change and a just and clean energy transition. So again, the ability for storage to be paired with renewables and to be used in these more congested areas, even for non-wires alternatives, is exciting to me, and I think also very compelling when we think about the storage industry, because in the end, even with the transit bus system, et cetera, you're ultimately improving the air quality and the environment of all of these communities. And that, to me, in and of itself, when you go back to the why, should be a very strong rallying cry beyond just the technical capabilities of storage and the fact that technology costs are coming down.
Yeah, there's really been a cultural shift that's definitely helping storage out. It's really something to see the kinds of things that customers are asking utilities about these days. It's almost gives one hope. So we've bounced around a bit talking about how regulators are kind of behind what's going forward with storage technology. So what about that regulatory system needs to shift for storage to really explode in potential? That might be a big question there, but I mean, because I'm also curious, like, what's localized versus what's kind of systemic nationwide as well, or across North America.
So I'll start from my perspective. I'm going to start at the state level because I feel like we have these big federal conversations, But really, the rubber hits the road when you hit, whether it's a state commission or a co-op or a muni, right? And they all have the same thing in the back of their mind, which is the last thing they want to do is raise somebody's bill. So when we get into technology, right, it really isn't, it's been around for a long time. I think it's hit sort of a critical need point where people are finally recognizing it. But the reality is these commissions and these groups, they create a program, right? You're in this pilot, and the pilot is extremely narrowly defined. And the utility or whoever is only authorized to do what's in that pilot. So even if they bring in other values, it's sometimes not even recognized in the pilot. So I would say we need to have a conversation that's very broad and not technology specific, but just storage is valued this way, right? And then if they want to test out a specific technology in a pilot, that's fine. But we've already sort of run the bigger gamut of this is the value of storage. So you don't sort of get shoved into, we're not putting baby in the corner, right? Like, let her out, let her dance, let her do the big leap at the end, because there's value there, right? We're not just doing the cha-cha, right? Like, there is more that you can do beyond just one single dance. And I think we need to recognize that. That's probably a terrible analogy, but just watch that Netflix show about movies that made us. So it's in my head.
It's a good movie.
Yeah,
Great
I
movie.
mean, I already touched on, some of the things. I think that there's an opportunity for greater harmonization between the federal and the state levels because of the agendas that the respective states and the federal government currently has. I mean, who knows with a change of administration, but I already mentioned the federal, the ITC. I think that could be a game changer and very positive, continuing again to support the dual participation, right, and the full value stack, like Teresa was saying, and then in the end, going back to the power that cities, frankly, and states have of setting aspirational goals. I will be complimentary of California. They've done a great job, but I live in New York, so I'm going to talk about New York. But we have a 3 gigawatt target by 2030 for storage as part of legislation. It's the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, 6 gigawatts of solar, and then 9 gigawatts of offshore wind. And I can say that once you put a stake in the sand, right, that people really start to figure out how to make it happen. And we've got the energy sector so exciting now that you've got all the best minds coming into it to make it happen. So you can't also underestimate setting those goals, and in the case of New York, having literal laws about it, of getting to carbon neutral by 2040, because that gets people, residents, businesses, and governments aligned in rowing in the same direction to try to make it happen.
So, John, a lot of the work you do, you work with C&I customers as well, big business people. So, what lessons have you learned about the broader potential of these solutions, and about maybe you can even hop onto the regulatory framework discussion if you want, with how's that world compared to the utility sphere?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We've really seen a lot of advancement in the C&I space, even more, or I should say earlier than many traditional utilities, in that they're looking at using batteries for various things, like business continuity, trying to battle impacts of climate, of fringe of grid or unreliable networks. We do a fair bit of work in off-grid remote communities, or in the Caribbean and the islands, or even into Latin America and Africa, where grids just aren't reliable. And batteries and integrating batteries with their traditional diesel and some type of renewable is almost second nature now. It's and that's really been a shift that we've seen in the last 5 to 8 years. 10 years ago, the number of studies that we were being asked to deliver was remarkable. We're keeping us extremely busy. And then 5 to 6, 7 years ago, someone said, okay, it's a great study. Now build it. And oh, okay, well, I guess it's getting to that point, and it's just been nonstop ever since. So the industrial clients in particular are looking at innovation. They're looking at How do you reduce your operating costs? And reliable power is required for that. You know, we're working with a ports client right now who has a lot of automated equipment in their yard. And if there is even a flicker, a power quality flicker issue, you know, all their machines sort of shut down. They all have to be restarted. And they have to go and figure out, okay, did I really pick up that container? Did I really move it over there? And it takes a lot of time. And when you only have a couple of days to load or unload a cargo ship, that's lost revenue, and you know, just takes one outage to justify that type of a spend. Another trend we're seeing is movable batteries. You know, not just e-buses, which you could certainly use as a mobile battery. In fact, I've got a great case for using school buses as a fleet of temporary batteries, but just having a mobile system that you can move between multiple facilities. If you've got a couple of different industrial plants or a couple of different office towers, you know, just to have that flexibility. Yeah, I think that's there's a lot happening in that C&I space. It's keeping us actually a little more busy than the work we're doing in the utility side at the moment.
Fleet of school buses as a battery is a very unique phrase that I like to. That's fun.
Yeah, they sit mostly idle during the summer, right? Which if you've got a heating peak load grid, it's a fantastic resource that you should be able to take advantage of somehow.
That's pretty smart. One thing that I wanted to touch on, because it was something that Sarah said that I thought was really interesting, is storage as a transitionary solution. Can you elaborate on what that means, Sarah?
Yeah, sure. No, so to me, I was talking about storage really as part of the clean energy transition, obviously as a technology, right? We're trying to move off of fossil fuels. We're trying to electrify everything and anything and everything we can, building electrification, transport electrification, and clearly storage is part of that solution. My comment was a little bit more around the impetus and the reason why we would want to think a little bit more broadly about storage, because the sooner that we can replace peaking fossil fuel capacity, albeit if we could get hydrogen in there that was clean and things, then that also could have a huge impact. But it was really more about improving the air quality and the environment of some of these typically disenfranchised communities that are in congested urban areas that are near power plants or are along bus lanes because they can't otherwise get around, right? So to me, it was really about storage helping support the reduction in price, right, in terms of energy costs and energy savings that John was talking about, and then providing the level of resiliency and the cleaner environment. So those are the two ways that I think about the term transition. One is just as a technology, and the other is really in supporting the greater good when it comes to clean environments for everyone.
I got to pick up on that word that you ended with there, Sarah, but technology and how people think that yes, these batteries are getting cheaper and cheaper, and how much cheaper can you get? Well, look at your computer. I keep comparing to people that if you truly think of either PV panel or a battery, and I am going lithium-ion batteries here more than others, I think, but ultimately these things get smaller. They get economies of scale that really bring down the production costs. They get more efficient, and they will continue to do so for a while. We've been speaking with a number of battery suppliers that we're looking at projects 12 and 18 months out from now, and even that far into the future, the differences in pricing is impressive, and it can make a difference between a project being economical or not. And I can only imagine what it's going to be 8-10 years from now. But personally, we view storage in whatever shape it may take as a core part of all energy solutions going forward. They're sort of ubiquitous with renewables now, and will continue to be, or should continue to be, a default item that's considered in all system planning elements.
So I have a question that this admittedly wasn't in our outline, but it's something that's come to mind. So what's something that you're really keeping your ear to the ground about? It could be a new kind of technology. It could be a specific use case you're interested in hearing more about, or some kind of legal battle going on. But just like what's something happening in storage right now that you think is exciting and you're interested in? To put you on the spot.
I think the idea of bringing storage down to that residential level, it's a strange thing that for me, about 10 years ago, I had a CEO of the company I worked for come to me and said, "Where are we going to be in 10 years, Teresa?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, everybody's going to have solar plus storage. The utility will just be a platform that enables that local energy market. It's going to be amazing. The world's going to be completely different." Well, flash forward 10 years, and I do think we're sort of heading in that direction, but it hasn't quite hit the residential level at as much as I think. And I do think that residential is going to be the tipping point. But I think residential has to be the tipping point with other things in their home that are controlling things for them. Smart thermostats are great, but I feel like we've gotten stuck in the smart thermostat world, right? Where we are relying on people to change their lifestyles to react to things. And we have to be honest, we're Americans and we're very embedded in our lives and we're not going to change, right? So to me, all the conversations now around storage that talk about how we have behavioral pieces, but storage can actually solve for those are the things that I'm listening to.
For me, again, we talk a lot about, yes, the orchestrated grid, the autonomous grid. And when we get to, and I guess it builds off of what Teresa said, when we get to a critical mass, right, where you have significant electrification, which to me would include storage, right, of the transport industries, when the grid can no longer solve it piecemeal. And really how the digital overlay, in conjunction, of course, with the regulatory, will be able to truly support it. It can do it technically now, but there's still a lot more advances, I feel, with digitization, AI, digital analytics that will really have a harmonized grid. I'm excited about that, and until we think about the system more holistically, it will be challenging, because right now we're band-aiding and we're using the same kind of interconnection approach we have to date in that front. And then the second thing I would say is that, again, like I said before, we've got great minds at work here, and we have the DOE, we have ARPA-E, right, the advanced research. I can't even think of it, but anyway, all of the research that's going into the different technologies. And in the end, for us to get to a fully decarbonized economy, to get it to a fully decarbonized grid, we ultimately need breakthrough technologies. And so to me, the work that's being done at universities around the country, including New York State, for new chemistries, for the different applications that storage can address, is very exciting to me. I'm not a scientist, but I really enjoy seeing all the great work that's there, and look forward to seeing things beyond what we see now in terms of lithium ion coming out onto the market in the next decades.
There's two things that come to mind for me. One is actually sort of touching on what Sarah just left off with there, is flow batteries in particular. Looking at these long duration storage technologies that more or less have unlimited cycles with near zero degradation. Those types of solutions are what we do need in the long run. The other thing that's really interesting in this space, and it's more on the EV side, but linked to the supply of the batteries, is the supply chain is changing, in that you're seeing automotive manufacturers looking much further back in the value chain to secure supply, even to the point of, I think I read somewhere that Tesla's investing in actual mining companies in order to secure their supply. And historically, you haven't had to do that. But when you look at the expected growth going forward, you really have to start looking at where are all those raw materials coming from, and how do we am I going to get my fair share to manufacture the number of EVs I've told my shareholders I am going to build over the next 10, 15, 20 years? So I think we're going to see that value chain, supply chain shift or in some way.
I think that's a great point, right? Because now everything you read about is the scarcity of the raw materials and where they're located in war-torn regions, et cetera, right? So again, there's a geopolitical competition to this as well, right? That the United States has to face. But one thing that John made me think of, again, is that is exciting to me, and is as we look at the supply chain, right, and we look at batteries and supporting how it can support the entire clean energy transition. Ultimately, that's helping our economy. It's helping the structural changes in our economy where certain industries are dying or slowly decaying. And now you have all of these great jobs that are being developed in support of the clean energy transition. So that to me is something that I'm watching, because we talk about it, but ultimately we are slowly starting to see that job creation, the retraining of individuals, and ultimately that supports our communities, our families, and the nation.
I'm going to tag on to that. I'm in Ohio, and I think Ohio has been sort of set aside as one of those states that's like, well, nope, it's going to be about coal and natural gas and nothing else. The weird thing is, and to Sarah's point, right, innovation finds a way. And when it finds a way, it becomes industry and it becomes part of our economy. And if you think about Ohio generally, people don't really see what's happening on the inside. First Solar is here. They're producing solar panels, right? We have solar manufacturing. It's become a huge part of my former hometown, from construction all the way to people that work there. Our Armada invented in Ohio, built, like we manufacture here in Ohio. We use an Ohio-based manufacturer for our technology. So that's happening here. There are industries here that are growing around this new climate future, whether it's carbon focused or just straight into renewables. There's technologies even in the heartland where people don't think about it, like happening. So it is finding a way, and Sarah's right, like industry is growing up around this, and I think it is going to start taking things over.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. We are at time. We did have one quick question come in through the chat, so I'm going to do a lightning round, really quick lightning round. So which he says, does that attitude of the homes being the key part of electric grid in the future change if geothermal makes a breakthrough? So each of you, 30 seconds, your take on geothermal. John, go.
So I'm actually a big believer in geo-exchange systems or ground source heat pumps as a source of residential heating and cooling. So I if you link that with a thermal battery, I think you're set.
Awesome. I wasn't actually timing you, but good work. Sarah.
Oh, me next. Okay, so yes, look, we're developing renewables. The wind blows more in certain areas, the sun shines more in certain areas, and you've got strong thermal activity in certain areas. So I mean, we should be leveraging all the natural resources that we have. And again, to Teresa's comments too, there and mine as being the original energy storage company of New York State, there are lots of technologies and lots of battery technologies, thermal and other, that can help advance all of this. So yes, I guess if that was a yes/no question.
Sure. And Teresa, final thought on geothermal?
So I live in a very rural area. Geothermal exists in my area. When you live in a rural electric co-op, you have geothermal in your area. So I think people look at it as like sort of this experimental thing. It's actually not. You liken it to broadband, right? There's certain areas that are going to have wind and solar, and there are certain areas that are going to have geothermal just because of where they're located. So I'm in the camp of all of the above, but I think to answer the question, yes, residential becomes even more important when you bring that in.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa, John, Sarah. You've all been wonderful. Great conversation about storage and how we can think about it in broader ways. Really, really exciting stuff. So yeah, I want to thank you for being on. I want to thank everyone for joining us for day one of ETS. Make sure to join us tomorrow starting at 9:50 a.m. Central Time, and make sure to share your favorite sessions. Let everyone know where they can go to get their fix on stuff that's changing the energy industry. Hope you'll have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.